Today, May 14th, 2026, Donald Trump sat across from Xi Jinping in the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. He looked at the president of China and said, "Such respect for China, the job you've done. You're a great leader. I say it to everybody. You're a great leader." 2 weeks ago, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called China the largest funder of state terrorism for purchasing Iranian oil. Same administration, same conflict, same policy, 14 days apart. The largest funder of state terrorism. You're a great leader. I want to spend the next 20 minutes explaining what the distance between those two statements reveals about who has the upper hand in Beijing today, and why the Council on Foreign Relations, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and every serious geopolitical analyst who has examined this summit reached the same conclusion. China arrived in Beijing with leverage. America arrived needing something. What Trump said and what he needed from Xi, let me be precise about the context in which Trump called Xi a great leader, because the context tells you everything about the negotiating dynamic. Trump is in Beijing because the war with Iran, now in its 75th day, has produced a stalemate that American military and economic pressure alone cannot resolve. Hormuz is still closed to 90% of commercial shipping. Iran has rejected the American 14-point proposal as, in the words of Iran's government, a demand for surrender and an attempt to secure through diplomacy what Washington failed to achieve on the battlefield. Iran's parliament speaker called the American proposal Operation Trust Me Bro and mocked the Axios reporting on the deal as Operation Fauxios. America has spent $29 billion. 13 Americans are dead. Harvard projects the total cost will reach $1 trillion. Gasoline costs 52% more than before February 28th. And Trump flew to Beijing to ask Xi Jinping for help. That is the context in which "you're a great leader" was said, not as a diplomatic pleasantry between equals, as the opening of a conversation in which the party saying it needs something from the party receiving it. The Council on Foreign Relations titled its pre-summit analysis, "At the Trump-Xi Summit, China will have the upper hand." The Center for Strategic and International Studies confirmed that during the summit, America will focus on the economy and Iran, things America needs resolved, while China will seek stability on Taiwan, something China wants but can wait for. America needs the Iran war to end. China can wait. That is not a relationship between equals. It is a relationship in which one party has leverage and one party is calling the other a great leader. What Besant said and what it reveals. 2 weeks ago, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent appeared on Fox News and said China is funding the largest state sponsor of terrorism by purchasing Iranian oil. He said America had made clear to them that any support for Iran would obviously be detrimental for our relationship. In the same statement, Bessent asked China to use its leverage over Iran to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. I want to hold those two elements of Bessent's statement together, because their combination is the most analytically revealing thing any American official has said about the diplomatic strategy of this entire conflict. Bessent accused China of funding terrorism, then asked the terrorism funder to apply diplomatic pressure on the party it is funding, then threatened the terrorism funder that its support would be detrimental to the relationship. And 2 weeks later, Trump flew to Beijing and called Xi a great leader. The diplomatic logic of this sequence is not coherent. You do not call a party a terrorism funder and then ask it for help and then call its leader a great leader within 2 weeks. Not because it is morally inconsistent, though it is, but because it is strategically counterproductive. Calling China a terrorism funder publicly before asking for its cooperation makes the cooperation harder to obtain. China cannot respond to American requests for diplomatic assistance while being called a terrorism funder without appearing to reward the accusation. The accusation and the request are mutually undermining. Unless the accusation was not designed to produce cooperation, unless it was designed for a different audience, the American domestic audience that needed to see the administration taking a hard line on China while simultaneously pursuing Chinese cooperation behind closed doors. In that case, the terrorism funder statement was domestic political management, and "you're a great leader" was the real diplomatic communication.
both designed for different audiences, both happening simultaneously. Neither one telling you what is actually being discussed in the private meetings at the Great Hall of the People. What Iran did on the day Trump landed in Beijing here is the fact that the American coverage of the Beijing summit is not leading with. On the day Trump arrived in Beijing, on the day he reviewed the honor guard with Xi Jinping and called him a great leader, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps launched a 5-day large scale military exercise in and around Tehran. The exercise is called Operation Martyr Commander. I want to explain what the timing of that exercise communicates, not what it achieves militarily, what it communicates diplomatically. Iran launched a large scale military exercise on the same day the American president arrived in Beijing to discuss ending the Iran war. That is a signal, directed at Beijing, at Washington, at the 1,600 ships still stuck in the Strait of Hormuz, at the American families paying 52% more for gasoline, and at the Iranian domestic audience that needs to see its government projecting confidence rather than preparation for concession. The signal is we are not waiting for the Beijing summit to determine our posture. We are exercising. We are preparing. We are not the party that flew to Beijing needing something. America flew to Beijing needing a deal. Iran launched a military exercise. That contrast, Trump's plane landing in Beijing, Iran's IRGC activating Operation Martyr Commander, is the most precise measurement of the strategic relationship between the two parties at the moment the summit began. What the Iran parliament's mockery reveals, Iran's parliament speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf posted on the same day the one-page memorandum reporting circulated, Operation Trust Me Bro failed. He added, now back to routine with Operation Fauxios, apparently a portmanteau of fake and axios. I want to be clear about what it means when the Speaker of Iran's parliament publicly mocks the American diplomatic process on social media, not in internal communications, publicly on his official account. It means Iran's government has assessed that the cost of public mockery is lower than the benefit of projecting confidence to its domestic audience. A government that is worried about the next American bombing campaign does not mock the American diplomatic process publicly. A government that believes it has the strategic upper hand does mock it publicly. This is consistent with everything else in Iran's behavior since the ceasefire on April 8th. Iran launched its military exercise on the day of the Beijing summit. Iran rejected the American proposal as a demand for surrender. Iran's foreign minister flew to Beijing to meet Wang Yi, not to Washington to make concessions. Iran's IRGC said America has not even begun yet after the Hormuz fire exchange. Each of these actions tells you the same thing that the parliament speaker's social media post tells you. Iran does not believe it is the party that is losing, and the party that does not believe it is losing does not capitulate at a summit in Beijing that it was not invited to attend. What Xi's position at the summit actually is? Let me explain what China's position in this summit is, because I think it is being mischaracterized in the American coverage as China being a mediator or an honest broker. China is not a mediator in this conflict. A mediator has no stake in the outcome. China has an enormous stake in the outcome. China is Iran's primary economic lifeline. China's shadow fleet has been delivering Iranian crude above pre war export levels throughout the American blockade. China's CIPS payment system has processed Iran's oil revenue outside American financial controls. China has been buying Iranian oil at discounted rates, below market price, while American consumers pay 52% above pre war prices. China has profited from this conflict. Every barrel of discounted Iranian crude that China purchased below market price is a transfer of economic value from Iran's difficult position to China's strategic advantage. Every week the war continues and Hormuz stays closed. The global oil price stays elevated, which benefits Russia, which benefits Gulf state producers, and which benefits China's negotiating position with every energy importing country in the world. Xi arrives at this summit as the leader of a country that has been collecting the economic dividends of the Iran war for 75 days. He arrives having just hosted Iran's foreign minister. He arrives knowing exactly what Iran's negotiating position is, what Iran's red lines are, and what Iran would be willing to accept. He arrives with more information about the party America is trying to negotiate with than America has, and Trump arrives calling him a great leader and asking for help. The CFR analysis that China will have the upper hand is not a prediction. It is a description of the structural reality that has been building for 75 days, what the Netanyahu UAE contradiction reveals about the summit's context. There is one more piece of context that I want to address before explaining what to watch from the Beijing summit. Netanyahu's office announced this week that he made a secret visit to the UAE and met with UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed. The UAE publicly denied it happened. The denial was immediate, categorical, and came from official UAE government communications. An Israeli prime minister claiming a secret diplomatic meeting that the other party publicly denies took place in the middle of an active conflict on the eve of the Beijing summit. This incident tells you something specific about the information environment in which Trump arrived in Beijing. If Netanyahu's office is releasing claims about diplomatic meetings that other parties deny, and if this is the intelligence environment in which American diplomatic strategy is being constructed, then the gap between what American officials believe is happening and what is actually happening may be larger than the Beijing summit can bridge. The UAE denial of Netanyahu's claimed visit is one data point. Trump's claim that Iran agreed to stop enrichment when Iran said there were no nuclear negotiations is another. Trump's claim of a state of collapse when Iran's oil exports were above pre war levels is another. The pattern of American official claims being contradicted by the parties those claims are about is the context in which "you're a great leader" was said in Beijing today. What to watch? The three signals. Three things will tell you in the next 48 hours whether the Beijing summit produced anything real. First, the oil price. If the Brent crude price drops significantly before any official announcement is made, the market has priced in a deal. Markets price reality before politicians announce it. A significant pre announcement oil price drop means something was agreed in the private sessions at the Great Hall of the People. Second, Iran's response. If Iran's foreign ministry issues a statement within 24 hours of the Trump Xi meeting that uses softer language than demand for surrender and Operation Trust Me Bro, the Beijing summit produced movement in the back channel. If Iran's foreign ministry says nothing or issues another statement mocking the American position, the summit produced a photograph of Trump and Xi shaking hands and nothing else. Third, whether the military exercise ends early. Iran launched Operation Martyr Commander as a 5-day exercise on the day Trump landed in Beijing. If the exercise ends before its 5-day schedule, if Iran stands down its military posturing before the summit concludes, it is a signal of genuine diplomatic movement. If the exercise runs its full 5 days and ends after the summit, Iran signaled that the summit changed nothing. Trump called Xi a great leader. 2 weeks ago, Besant called China a terrorism funder. The Council on Foreign Relations says China has the upper hand. Iran launched a military exercise on the day Trump landed. The parliament speaker called American diplomacy Operation Trust Me Bro. Watch the oil price. Watch Iran's language. Watch the military exercise. Because what the Beijing summit actually produced will be visible in those three signals before any official statement tells you what happened.